Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Bloodred Hourglass, We Should Be Buried Like This, out October 3rd on Out of Line Music. The album has 10 tracks, 37 minutes in length, and this is the band's 7th full-length studio album. They are a Finnish metal band. As far as the design of this record goes, there's not much to say. It's a concise album, it's a compact album, but 10 songs, 37 minutes kind of lends itself to it. It's a record that doesn't have a lot of deviations. There are some ebbs and flows from song to song, but it's not an album that offers drastic changes on a track-by-track basis. It stays very connected, and it offers a very connected experience all the way throughout. Now, being 10 songs and 37 minutes in length plays well into this overall experience because it doesn't allow the album to become redundant. It doesn't allow the album to become repetitive. It still feels fresh, even though the sense of continuity is very linear throughout, with a few exceptions here and there that really distort a little bit of that linearity. As far as the sound is concerned, I think there's two main elements, one in the sound itself and the other one in the atmosphere, that really set this record apart from its predecessors. The first element is within the sound, and that is the electronic aspects that this record has, the synths, the electronic sounds. They're super predominant on this album, more so than on any other record the band has ever released. Now, they've always had these elements there, but I don't feel like they've ever used them the way that they're used on this album. Pushing at times a little bit more of an EDM, electronic, and even industrial vibe into the songs, allowing those elements to be there not just for the melody that's always been the case with Bloodred Hourglass, but this time they're bringing them a little bit more to the forefront sporadically throughout the record to also become part of the texture of the tracks, also become part of what drives the songs forward, and become almost as big of an element as the guitars, bass, or drums. That's where I see the difference. The melodic side of those electronic elements, that is something that I've seen before, that's part of the band's DNA, and it's still used on this record. But when you have that consistent bass line, and then on top of that you add even more, and you allow them to be such a huge part of the fabric of some of the songs on this record, the perception that you give the listeners is that this is a very modern, electronic driven album throughout, even though if it's not the case consistently on every single song, but it's the perception that you create, and perception becomes reality, and that's exactly what this album puts forward. The other aspect that has nothing to do with the sound directly, but it's influenced by the sound, is the vibe on this album. I've always felt like Bloodred Hourglass created records that had a certain darkness to them. This album, that darkness is a lot more noticeable, is a lot more palpable, it's a lot easier to see, not just in the lyrical content, but in the sound and in the mood, that the vibe, the atmosphere that same sound creates. A lot of that electronic sound feels at first glance that it's brightening up the songs, that's making the songs feel a little bit bigger. It's not. It's actually adding to that somberness that the record has. That vibe becomes more noticeable, becomes more predominant. And I really feel like that atmosphere of darkness is definitely something that glues this whole record together, regardless of the style or approach that the band decided to take on any given song. Now, the drum sound on this album is very subtle. It's not super impactful, it's not super in the forefront, but that's never really been the case with the band either. They always use the drums to complement the overall volume, to complement the overall texture of the tracks, and on this album they stayed very close to home. The guitar sound is a huge piece of any Bloodred Hourglass puzzle. On this album, I felt like the guitars in certain tracks where the electronic elements have a more predominant presence, the guitars become secondary, they lose a little bit of the shine, they lose a little bit of the spotlight, but overall you're still going to get great riffs, great melodies, solos that really add some energy to the songs. So the guitars on this album are not consistently the focal point of each and every single track, but they're still a huge piece of the band's puzzle. Once you get into the vocals, I felt like this album consistently was a lot heavier than the previous record. This album definitely relies a lot more on the heavier side of the vocal range versus the clean vocals. There's still clean vocals throughout the record, but it's not as heavily predominant as it has been in previous albums. This album, it really feels like the harsh vocals also represent a lot better that overall somber, darker nature that the record carries. Another element of the vocals that I thought was really cool on this album is the use of backing vocals almost to create choirs. And that adds almost a live experience to the way these songs translate coming out of the studio, especially when it comes to the choruses. Definitely allowing the choruses to become more memorable, to become more noticeable. This is a record that shows the evolution of the band. I don't think anybody who's been listening to this band over the past 6 records, I don't think this record really surprises them by going into this more modern, electronic driven sound. I think that has been something that's been growing within the band, and this record perhaps is the culmination of that growth. The surprise for me was the step back on the vocals, because I thought that they were going to continue to push more of a clean vocal style approach and have a lot more of that. I thought that was going to be the direction. So they decided to push further away from the beaten path on the sound while pulling back on the vocals. That's an interesting dynamic. The record has its moments, is not necessarily a consistent record from top to bottom, but it's a record that still feels like Bloodred Hourglass. It just feels like a brand new chapter of what Bloodred Hourglass is. This album is definitely far away from the debut record, both chronologically and from a soundscape standpoint. As far as favorite songs goes, I want to start off with God Has Favorites. This is a track where you can really hear the electronic influences right at the intro, and then they really stay connected with the song throughout. The vocals on this track are amazing. I really like the delivery of the vocals because it matches that more electronic, metalcore, modern sound that the track has. It allows Together to really create a cool, melancholic experience for the song. And the vocals grow and the track musically grows. The track gets heavy or heavier as it progresses, and the vocals also get heavier as they progress. So they never lose that electronic backdrop. That's an important aspect, but the track does become heavier and bigger, both musically and vocally, and that is a really cool idea for the song, because it's not growing towards the chorus and then dipping in the verses, then growing in the chorus. There's this exponential growth all the way throughout, and then it finishes off with keys that kind of merge it back to the beginning of that electronic sound. So there's a sense of kind of almost going full circle as far as this track goes. Really cool song from that standpoint. Then you have a track like Frail, really somber track. This is one of those where you can really feel that sense of coldness and darkness within the song. It doesn't deviate from it. It keeps that underlying darkness alive and well, that vibe alive and well, all the way throughout the entire song. It's very melodic. It's very melodically driven. The guitar sound and the solo section are really cool on this track. They also emphasize that overall darkness and somber nature of the song. They really bring that atmosphere to life, and it's one of those tracks that's not explosive both musically and vocally, but it's definitely explosive in terms of the emotional drive and how emotionally drenched this song is. Then you have Shun the Limelight. This track is really interesting because it feels like a merger of Turmion Katilot and Electric Callboy. So you have a little bit more of Electric Callboy style approach, specifically when it comes to the heavier sound of Electric Callboy, that modern metalcore heavier sound. You're definitely going to get a lot of that in the verses, and then you get to the chorus and it feels more like a Turmion Katilot song. It feels more like a party song, very electronic, very industrial, with that kind of vibe. So it's a really Jekyll and Hyde song that on top of these two experiences, you have that melodic backdrop that's always the case with any Bloodred Hourglass track. So it's a really two sides of a single coin. Like I said, a Jekyll and Hyde style track, but it works really well. These two worlds really combine themselves really well on this song, and the track is very fun to listen to. It has a lot of energy, and there is some darkness in this song, but it's definitely darkness that comes more from the heavier side of the track and not necessarily from the more electronic side of the track. It works in a different way as far as the dynamics of the internal track are concerned. This is at Bloodred Hourglass. We Should Be Buried Like This, once again out October 3rd on Out of Line Music. Hit me up in the comment section, let me know your thoughts. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care, guys.